welcome. It's another core competency video day.
It's the last core competency video.
The final core competency video. Unless you're in 102, in which case those will be separated out into two, and there'll be another one after this. So don't. The final one we're recording, but we'll be discussing core competencies 7 and 8. Before we do that, friendly reminder, we want to hear from you. So please join in the conversation. We would love to absolutely hear from you. We are live and we will answer your questions. Leave them in the comments. If you're in 102 and watching this, then go ahead and add them to your homework. If you have questions, your facilitator would love to help you with that. And that is all for that. Did I forget anything, y'all?
I don't think so.
And we are gonna just dive right in, I think, shall we?
Also,
if you're just tuning in and you're like core competencies 7 and 8, what? You can go back and catch up starting with number 1. We have those videos on our YouTube and our Facebook channels, and we do have 1 through 6 available for you to watch, so go back and watch those. And if you're enjoying them, make sure you hit that subscribe button. It's the only way we know that you enjoy what we're doing. So please hit that subscribe. We want to hear from you. We appreciate your support. There we go. Words are hard. All righty, let's get into it, shall we?
So we're finishing up letter C, communicating effectively. This is the last part of communicating effectively. And it's number 7, evokes awareness.
Which is defined as facilitates client insight and learning by using tools and techniques, tools and techniques such as powerful questioning, silence, metaphor, or analogy. And I think we've learned the best way for us to do this is to dive right in. This one has the most sub-competencies of any of the core competencies, and number 8 also has quite a few, so we're going to have to move fairly quickly through these. So let's talk about number 1 on this is considers client experience when deciding what might be most useful.
So the confusion that happens in this space is the coach, especially a beginning coach, thinks they have to consider their own experience, but clearly this states it's the client. Consider the client's experience. So you want to pull from what they know, what they value, what's impacted them. This is not digging in the history, though. This is pulling forward on who they are.
You also got to have a conversation about the client's experience in regards to their goals in the first place, because if you don't know what their experience is, then you can't really use this sub-competency. So, there's got to be conversations about, what have you done in the past to maybe address this goal or work towards it? Or, how is your context or background influence, the goal that you want to achieve? That's all part of the experience as well.
And
that was a good way of stating it, Anthony. Nice.
It was.
Yeah. It was.
I think also the experience it goes beyond when we say what is your past experience in X, Y, and Z, and it's what was their experience in the present goal in what they are working on, what was their actual experience, process, whatever it might be, as they were starting to move through this. And that's where that exploration, I think, really begins. I do think, though, we really have to address something in this that we have not addressed yet. And that is the deciding what might be most useful.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean?
Yeah, it means you as the coach don't determine that. You don't know that. The client determines that. The client is the one who knows that. So anytime you're speaking on something, checking in with the client, How do you think that could be useful to you? Do you think that could be useful to you? What do you think could be most useful to you in this space? Those type of questions come to mind for me.
It's weird that it kind of, this subconscious is a little bit vague. I also think it refers to what might be most useful. It's referring to the tools and techniques such as questioning, silence, metaphor, and analogy. Some people might not like using metaphors so much. They are very direct people. Their experience is, we're not up in, the clouds, la la land, we're down to earth. So the tools I will be using give based on my client's past experience, down to earth. I'm talking their language.
Did anybody identify Anthony's bias in that moment? Anybody?
No, let's continue.
So basically, Anthony thinks that people who use metaphor are up in the clouds.
They're not down to earth.
Yes. But yeah, some tools might work for some people really well, and other times they will fall flat.
So we know what we would not be using with Anthony if we wanted him to respect what we were doing and not think we were up in the clouds. Although being in the clouds, I don't think it's such a bad thing.
That's also a metaphor I use. So
sorry, I'm late, everybody.
Misha's here, everyone.
I think that's hi Misha, welcome in. That is also very important. That what might be most useful. We want to consider our client when deciding what is most useful, and that's where we're going to ask into, what we're going to delve into. We're gonna serve their needs before our own. So,
and so that means we have to be adaptable. That also means we have to be practiced. So through all of the work that we're talking about, all the different competencies, it is really about get out there and practice using the tools and practice watching your client and body language along with what they're saying of what helps them work through whatever direction they're trying to move towards. So in that space of practice, don't overthink it. Just try it on. Follow their lead. If it doesn't work for them, then adapt to something else.
Don't overthink it.
Yeah.
I mean, make it more complicated than it needs to be.
No, I said don't overthink it.
I know.
Oh,
Is that like a natural tendency for all of us to as we get more experience, but overthinking it, making it more complicated, putting too much weight in certain areas, right?
Yeah.
Don't do that. Don't do it.
All right. I think we can move on to the second one. This one's got some meat and potatoes behind it, I think, things for us to discuss. So let's dive right in. Challenges the client as a way to evoke awareness or insight. What does that mean?
I know that in the classes 101, 102, people say, but if we're challenging them as a way to evoke awareness, don't we have an agenda then? Aren't we like anticipating and trying to expect them to get somewhere? No, you're not. You're not. And that's why you have an intake. That's why you talk about the styles and what they're going to need and want and how you're going to act as a coach. I'll pause there and let somebody else add in.
So when you are having time with your client, you're getting to know them and you're able to pick up on patterns of who they are, those values, those core beliefs, all of those concepts. And when they say something that basically either goes against it or the right answer, like they'll answer because sometimes they'll just want to give you the right answer, I will challenge it. And sometimes I even use that word, I haven't heard you say those things, so I'd like to challenge you on that. And they'll go, oh, okay. Here's what I've heard you say in the history of what we've spoken about. How does that sit with what you've shared?
Mm-hmm.
I think another question that people don't realize is also a challenge. If somebody says, I really want to have a healthy relationship, and we stop and we pause and ask them, what does healthy mean to you? That's a challenge, right? Because they're all of a sudden like, oh, I never thought about defining that. So it's a subtle way of challenging.
Yeah, keep it simple.
Jen, I feel like you might be a little proficient in this space. What are your thoughts here?
To me, this is about not always fully believing everything the client says, right? Challenging their story about who they think they are, about what they think about, just gently challenging it in a way that invites them to expand on their perspective very organically. Because something as small as like, is that true? Sometimes for me, at least, because I've been both coach and client, those moments of just having that gentle challenge allows me to go, oh wait, actually, hold on, I'm lying to myself right now. And that's really powerful for the client to have that moment where they're catching themselves in a story that may or may not be true.
I'm a liar. It's true. And this is, I think, some of the tools we provide in 102. So those of you watching this, you have that to look forward to. Those polarizing languages that we might hear our clients use.
Always, never.
Those are asking around sort of polarization and things like that. That always, that never, that I don't know. That those kind of moments are opportunities. Hi, Steve.
Hi, Steve.
Opportunities for us to evoke awareness and insight with our clients by asking into those spaces. It also, when we get to, I think it's well more prevalent in PCC level coaching and MCC level coaching, is that moment when we make an observation, right? That's I noticed that this happens when can you speak into that or things like that? When we make observations and we're sort of putting ourselves out on a limb, we're not making our client own those observations. We're just asking into them. And that is always, I think, those are often moments that evoke awareness.
But don't be attached to those observations because it could mean something different.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes.
Shall we move forward to numero tres?
Yes.
Okay. Ask questions about the client, such as their way of thinking, values, needs, wants, and beliefs.
So this one is really clear. And what it's not saying is don't ask the client questions that help become better informed about their workplace, their boss, other people. This is saying ask questions about the client's way of thinking, about their values. Oftentimes I'll hear people finding, like someone says, I'm trying to figure out, whether I want to stay with this company. And they ask, well, what kind of company is it? And how long have you been there? And why have you been there? And what do you do there? And it's like, that's for you. Yeah. You want to know more information? It's for you. How are those questions helping your client grow? No, they're not. So this is really important.
This is also a fun one because a lot of the blocks that will come from a client and their goals comes from contradictions between multiple of these. So their values don't jive with their wants, or their beliefs don't jive with their way of thinking, and they're contradicting each other. And you as a coach, if you're curious, you'll ask into that and you'll try to tease out what is maybe more important to the client and what do they want to use to guide their decisions. Because not all of these are going to be in complete alignment with each other.
A lot of those are really strong pivotal moments in a session that you just described that allow them to just regroup and really analyze who they are and what they want.
All right, let's continue.
Number 4. Ask questions that help the client explore beyond current thinking. I mean, I think this is pretty obvious, right? But I'm just going to...
You muted. Oh, no, there you are.
Yeah, no, so I'm just asking you guys to speak into it. Ask questions that help the client explore beyond the current thinking.
So it's self-explanatory, but like, why is it relevant to explore beyond the current thinking? Like, shouldn't we just take our clients' current thinking at face value? Apparently not.
So Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say the current thinking may not be helpful to them achieving their goals. The current thinking might be that they can't achieve this goal, or they're limited in some capacity.
Or it could, but until they start experimenting with what they're sharing, coming up with different options and different possible ways of identifying, thinking something through, one, it could be the right answer for them in that moment, or it could be something that allows them to break through some, like Steve was just saying, breaks through some of those limiting beliefs, those different blocks that prevent them from jumping through. And even taking the stigma out of it, and that they have to be right, and this is what they're going to have to stick to. Just kind of get into that experiment of who they want to become and how they want to get there.
Mm-hmm. This also, to me, is about opening up possibility, because with their current way of thinking, there's only a specific possibility. And when they start thinking in different ways, putting on different thinking hats, thinking in shades of gray, more nuanced, less black and white, all of a sudden more possibilities open up, and then they seem to have more options. They have more variety of what's possible for them. And that can change the whole trajectory of the conversation.
Hello, Sue. Hello. Yes,
hi, Sue.
I agree with you. And some of the questions that we've talked about in our classes, like, are the contingent questions, right? What would happen if you did that? What would happen if you didn't do that? What would not happen if you did that? What would not happen if you didn't do that? I always go and mix that one up, but explore beyond, and also why they're not coming to you because they want to sit in their current thinking anyways. I mean, they think they do, but oftentimes they're coming to us because they want to get beyond their own current thinking, right?
All right, let's move forward to number 5. Invites the clients to share more about their experience in the moment.
Tell me more, like no, we don't want to know about his car, but anyways, yes.
And I think this is pretty straightforward. So we talked about it a little bit earlier. So I'm actually kind of comfortable with us moving to the next one. I was just looking at the time and how many more we have to cover. There's some that are a little more nuanced. So notices what is working to enhance client progress.
So this carries on between sessions, not just really in the current session. The client will probably tell you what is working, what isn't. If you're doing that beginning check-in at the start of the session of like the Go Learn structure that we have, they'll let you know, what did they do in between sessions and what worked for them and what didn't work for them.
But sometimes it's not, they don't. And sometimes it's, if you've been working, like, for example, when I was working with somebody for 8 months and then they come in and something happened and I asked them, what's different about the way you responded to that now than what you did when you first came to see me 9 months ago, right? So I didn't have to say it, but I helped them notice it by asking. And they were like, oh yeah, I'm not taking the crumbs anymore. Huh, okay.
Yeah, that's a really important and an impactful kind of question, especially if you've been working with someone for a while. That helps them see the nuances and who they have now found their boundaries and voice in different aspects. Nice.
I'll also say that this is beyond what the work the client is doing, but also what is working for your communication style, your presence, what you are doing as a coach that is working to enhance the client's progress. So if I am noticing that my metaphors don't work with Anthony, I'm not going to use them. But I notice that when I speak into some other very techno babble speak and he responds well to that, then I'm going to stick in that kind of languaging. Or noticing that when I challenge, I'm going to challenge somebody who is a people pleaser much differently than I'm going to challenge somebody who is categorically not a people pleaser and is, I'm in the antithesis of that. So I'm going to approach those 2 different ways, and I'm going to change my communication style to fit what will be best to the client's progress as a coach. That's the work I have to do in that too, I would also say. Yeah.
I just want to add, for those who are viewing and just saw me bust out into laughter, I don't want you to feel like you're missing out. It was stated in this chat by Steve that John Travolta has a whole different story about what happened on the beach from Sandra.
True story.
So I wasn't well, I guess in some way I was disrespecting Brooke while she was talking, but it's Steve. So anyways, agreed with you also.
I think this dovetails perfectly into the next one, and I kind of started speaking into the next subcompetency. So maybe I just got excited and I jumped ahead, but adjust the coaching approach in response to the client's needs. So take what I just said, apply it to number 7. Is there anything else we want to add to that?
You don't really get to determine the client's needs. You should ask, what do you need now? What do you need to move forward? What do you need to accomplish this goal? What do you need to feel content with this coaching session? And that's like established at the beginning of the coaching session in the session contract. And then you check in at the end of the coaching session and see if you've accomplished that.
It's also the silence. When we step back, that can evoke awareness because we're not butting in to a thought or an emotion that they're having. We're not stopping them in their tracks by putting ourselves in there. So while that silence piece is also part of cultivating trust and creating that safe space, it also is an approach. As you notice the client is in a certain kind of emotion or field of awareness, don't jump in. Just enjoy that silence and allow them to be in that place. And that's adjusting your coaching approach, right? You're not asking questions right now. You're stepping back.
So providing that space, providing that ability for that client to finish their thoughts and their feelings and whatever's going on in there. Also, the ability to adopt a new behavior, a new way of interacting, watching with the client, but there's no rushing any of this. This is not like, oh shoot, they're quiet. I got, do the approach that Misha just spoke about. Calm that space down, just be present, let the client fill in that gap. You don't need to fill it in. If something needs to adjust, then you just make that adjustment.
Brooke is muted again. She is. She's still muted. Well, let's continue to number 8 then while Brooke figures out her audio. 8 helps the client identify factors that influence current and future patterns of behavior, thinking, or emotion. So there is pattern recognition that happens in between sessions. Yes, they can hear me type very loudly. We're chatting in the side chat and I'm responding to them. Thank you, guys. So back to subcompetency 8. What are some factors, or how can we identify these factors for the clients?
I think it's something Lisa said earlier, which is noticing and bringing stuff forward and then asking into it. How does that relate, or how does that connect, or what is the impact on that you shared earlier with what you're sharing with me now? That's what comes to mind when I read that.
I think as well, even just like trying to figure out what is outside of the client's control and what is inside the client's control, because we can coach what's inside their control to a certain degree. What's outside of their control can definitely influence the current behavior, thinking, or emotion, and maybe it's less about trying to fix that, and maybe the client has to find out how to manage that, and maybe that's the focus of the coaching session instead.
I would also caution the speed that you try to evoke this, right? You've got to let the client be who they are, not feel judged, because if you do anything too fast before you've actually worked the trust and into the relationship of what you're doing in coaching, this can feel overwhelming to a client. So this becomes a space of getting to know your client getting to know you. And then, you're keeping track of the information that your client is providing you. And as they're providing that for you, you also keep it in the back of your mind as you go through your coaching sessions with them.
All right, let's move on to number 9 then.
Do I have Mike?
Yes.
Okay. Invites the client to generate ideas about how they move forward and what they are willing or able to do.
I feel like that's self-explanatory too.
I do less inviting and more I tell them. So I say, so how do you want to move forward? What do you want to do? I just ask the question. I don't sort of.
Anthony is less invitational, less of an invitational coach and more of a direct.
I don't know. I would call that a direct invitation.
Yeah, it's an invitation. You're just not using the word invite.
Right.
But call it what you like. You know, your session.
Yeah. To be even more direct, I'll be generate an idea about how you can move forward now.
So even you can add continued sense of humor when you're with your client, because if he's in a rapport with his client, he can jokingly say these kinds of things and still get a very viable, fun session. You could take other words. You could say spaghetti on the wall. Nothing is important until you make it important and it sticks. So let's just throw different ideas out there.
But the important part is the coach is not doing it. The client is doing this.
Yeah.
If I had a magic wand, what would you have? What would you want? What would you do?
If it could be easy right now, really easy, just getting them thinking creatively about what's next for them.
If money wasn't a concern. Yeah, right.
Yeah,
All right, let's move forward to number 10. Supports the client in reframing perspectives. I see a lot of head nodding. This is a delicate.
Yeah, I was thinking how to best go down. Yeah.
So notice it supports and doesn't say reframes client's perspective.
Exactly.
It supports the client in reframing perspectives. So they are leading that reframe. They are choosing the direction it goes. They are choosing how to reframe it. We are not filling in those blanks. We are not saying, how do we make that positive?
Mm-hmm. No. And you can ask, so you have this thought, what would be an opposite thought? And which one seems to relate best to you? So in that reframe, you're taking what they have and opening up the options, which is like the other numbers that we've worked on, the other competencies, sub-competencies we've worked on. But this is just another nuance that adds a deeper layer to what you're doing.
And this is, again, that always never moment, that I don't know moment. Well, I don't know the answer. I don't know what to do. I don't know. We can just ask them that I don't know, shift their perspective and reframe it into a space of them. Oh, they do know what the next steps are. They do know what to do. That is a reframe. When we say always, and we say, is that always true? When you say always, they're going to be the ones that answer that question and tell you what if it is in fact always. And we're not leading that reframe. We're just asking and supporting it. So into and supporting it.
Another thing with the reframe that I like to do is always offer, if I may share, I'm hearing this in a different way. And I'm curious what comes up for you when I share that. I'm curious, what do you think about that? Like giving them total agency over the reframe to tell you whether it lands or whether that's not something for them.
Exactly. And not being attached.
Right.
You guys just dived into number 11 without knowing it. Shares observations, insights, and feelings without attachment that have the potential to create new learning for the client.
Well, I'm going to share my observations. It's 4:32 and I got to go. It's great being here with all of you. Have fun.
All right. See you, Misha.
So in that space of allowing that client to really get into their own stuff without creating a right or wrong connection to it, or that's not what I did, that is what I did, and that's not going to work, because you never know what the success ingredients are for someone else. They're different for every person. There might be some seasoning to it. Notice I'm metaphoring, guys. Hello. There might be different seasonings that one person will utilize, whereas another person completely different. So you never want to go in there attached to what is right or wrong with the next growth mindset that they're moving in.
Also, I feel like we have covered this competency well, but there is something that isn't mentioned that I just want to circle back up to that was mentioned in the definition. And that is the silence piece, because it didn't actually, they don't mention it. They say it at the top, they don't bring it in. And so that silence piece is the coach being comfortable with being silent and letting that client talk, get it all out. 80-20, the client should be speaking 80% of the time. We should be speaking 20% of the time, even less. So just get comfortable with that. Be okay with it. Be okay with not interrupting and just letting your client, speak and share and get comfortable in that silence. And we drill that home a lot. So circling back.